So, the year-long journey has begun. I'm here in Peru, Lima to be exact. But that's not why I'm here. I'm actually going to a more remote location, a place called Chavin, to meet with leaders of indigenous tribes from across South America. Tribes like the Mayans, the Toltec, the Incas. They come from all parts of South America, like Bolivia, Colombia, Mexico. And we're meeting here to discuss the prophecy of the eagle and the condor. But more on that later. And now, I gotta catch a bus. Between Chavin and Lima are a number of diverse landscapes, from deserty views a few hours outside of Lima to the mountainous hills that Peru is famous for. It's a long journey ahead to get there. I have to take a bus from Lima to Huantar, and that's an 8 to 9 hour bus ride. From Huantar to Chavin, it's a 2 to 3 hour taxi ride. Traveling to these remote locations can be exhausting, but the sights are well worth it. The elevation was somewhat of a challenge. It wasn't until Huantar where the head pressure started to kick in pretty bad. But fortunately, I ran into some other travelers earlier that day and they were nice enough to give me some Tylenol. However, it wasn't strong enough for this ride that I was about to go on. I got a taxi from Huaraz to Chavin. And I don't know what this guy's deal was, but he was in such a hurry. He was driving through these mountainous areas at 60 miles per hour and even driving into the other lane to pass other vehicles while curving around the mountains. It was way too much for me. I had to have him pull over 3 times so I could throw up. The next morning, the ceremonies started with the tribes, but unfortunately, I had to miss the first day because of the ride the night before. But that's okay. It gave me a chance to walk around Chavin and have a look. Chavin de Huantar is an archaeological site in Peru, containing ruins and artifacts constructed as early as 1200 BC and occupied until around 4 to 500 BC by the Chavin, a major pre-Inca culture, with a population today of around 800 people. People are very friendly. Given it is such a remote location, most of what they live on is created and managed by the locals. So as I had mentioned earlier, the reason for this gathering is a gathering to discuss the prophecy of the eagle and the condor. This is a prophecy shared amongst the indigenous tribes, stretching all the way north into Canada, into all of South America. It is a prophecy shared amongst the Mayans, the Toltec, the Incas, the tribes in Canada, the indigenous tribes of the US. This prophecy foretells a time where they will come together again. This is a time of a great spiritual awakening where people of the world will start to ask more deeper questions of who they are, what is their spiritual nature, and how to live with the world in a sustainable way. The teachings of the indigenous people during this time will be shared according to this prophecy. It is a time of sharing of knowledge to help bring balance, to help bring connection for the people. This prophecy at this point is unfolding. This is why we are seeing the indigenous tribes come from many parts of the world. It's not just a phenomenon happening between the tribes of the Americas. This is happening in Asia. We're seeing this in Siberia. We're seeing this across the world, where indigenous leaders are coming to the modern cities and asking us to awaken, to be closer and more connected with the earth. They want us to seek and understand more deeply who we are as individuals, our spiritual nature. This is a process that we are experiencing right now during this great awakening. The ceremonies were definitely something else, a very enlightening experience. Most of the ceremonies were similar in many ways. They seemed to all involve a fire pit and prayers. Prayers to the cosmos, prayers to the earth, for blessings, for understanding, for knowledge, for the overall well-being of not just the people, but every living being on planet Earth. Items will be placed in the fire as gifts to the cosmos. As these items burn, these messages are carried with the smoke. This seems to be a common trend amongst these ceremonies. One of the ceremonies was conducted by a Mayan tribe leader. This was a powerful ceremony. Within 15 minutes, I was put into a state of trance, I guess the best way to describe it, that typically takes me about 2 hours of meditation and preparation to achieve. The ceremony started at 7, and my group arrived at 8 that morning. We walked into the ceremonial area, and the ceremony was going on. I sat down and just watched. I didn't fully understand what they were saying, but just listened. There's something about the prayers, the sound of the prayers, and the harmony of all the individuals that were involved that created some type of an experience, of a vibration. And I decided to close my eyes, meditate for a small moment. It took about 10 minutes at the most, max, before my body started to shake a little bit, vibrate. The emotion that came was pretty intense. I felt spirit. It was an acknowledgement, I think, letting me know of what spirit feels like. Sometimes when you're in deep meditation, you feel something. You feel a connection to earth, particularly if you're in nature, and that's most of where I meditate. And there's like a connection that you feel with something bigger. And this connection during this ceremony was pretty powerful. It was something I won't forget.
We just had one of the strongest ceremonial experiences for myself, but it was a cacao ceremony, a true cacao ceremony. And it was held by the Mayan leaders. And it was an experience like none other. There was a true ecstasy, a true vibration and frequency that we were all tuning into, a true trance that starts happening. And in that ceremony, the ancestors truly start talking through you. There's no other way to describe it. And what we just had was one of the strongest ceremonies, the true cacao ceremonies led by the Mayan leaders, and with all the leaders of most of the South and Central and Latin American tribes and indigenous people. And so what we just had was something I've never experienced in that way, so strong. And quite frankly, I don't think it's very easy to replicate what we just had, but it was beautiful.
Explain the experience that you had inside that trance.
See, so for me, and I think for others, the experience at first is interesting because there's no way to not feel surrounded by energy with the people that are in the lodge and the room around the fire. And as you begin drinking the cacao, you are first experiencing the music and feeling things. And you're going with the prayers of the ceremony. And then an ecstasy, a feeling starts taking over. An energy, the medicine of the cacao starts kicking in. And the voices and the music, they start to lead you into a path of the ancestors. And you start connecting as you're making offerings to the fire, of the seeds, of the candles, of yourself, and giving the prayers. It's allowing in that ecstasy and in this ritual, in this ceremony, for a true trance to begin. And for me, it's interesting because some of the words, the Mayan words, the countdowns and the things that we're saying together, it's almost like the ancestors start talking through you. Maybe you don't understand the words, but you can say them. And you find yourself talking through yourself. Seriously, you find yourself talking through yourself to your ancestors, asking them to guide you, asking them to give you the power, the energy that's necessary to do the job that needs to be done, the work. And as you're dancing around the fire with the other elders and spiritual leaders who are also talking to their ancestors and asking for their manifestations and committing themselves to the fire, it becomes a very unique experience, indescribable.
Many of us through the history books have heard stories of human sacrifice being involved in the ceremonial practices of indigenous tribes of South America, particularly the Mayans, the Aztecs. There are others that have been blamed for these types of practices. But in meeting with the spiritual leaders who are actually Mayans, And some of who have been blamed for these types of practices explained to me that this is not true. This is false. It is a twisting of their history. The Mayans have a deep appreciation for life. They have a deep understanding about life. And human sacrifice is not part of their spiritual practices. I think we should be mindful in what it is that we believe about these tribes through the history books that we have had in our educational system, unfortunately. Let's keep an open mind. On the last day of ceremonies, we went up to an even more remote location from Chavin. It was about an hour drive to the location, and then an hour walk up the mountain once we got there. This location was very remote. We had a chance to see some locals that are living in that area, and they are living in such a historic way.
What a journey to get to this location. Along this path are natives, obviously, to these lands, and they live, as you can see, in a very unique way. Much respect to these people. They live off the land, no electricity. They have the animals here to keep them surviving. As you can see here, got their sheep, little family of goats. I don't know if I could pet them. Up I go. Up here is a different connection with the surroundings. It's a matter of understanding the surroundings in order to survive with it and use it as medicine, as shelter, as fire, as water, everything in order to survive. The connection that these people have up here is not too unique, I think, from other people in the world. They feel the same emotions like us, but they have perhaps different family values that they live by. A closer connection, perhaps. It's just something to think about.
So, after the ceremony, we were coming down the mountain, and the bus that had taken us up had been blocked off by some construction. There was a pipe being laid down through the road, and it was going to take about 2 hours for this project to end. So we decided to just walk down, and the best timing was it started to rain right as we were coming down the mountain. So it was about a 3-hour walk down the mountain in the rain, but the conversations and the sights were definitely well worth it.
Moved away from the conflict zones to peaceful zones. Yeah. And people who are kind of fighters, they stayed back to fight back. And people who are like a good speakers who can explain things better. They became kind nomads. They travel from.
I was joined by a man from India, Digant. He told me a lot of good stories. I had mentioned to him that it is interesting how India today has continued in its spiritual culture across the entire country, it seems. Spirituality is a big part of the entire country's way of life. From what I hear is when families go on vacation, they'll go to spiritual sites. And I told him it's interesting to see that as part of India, but in South America, it's not as pronounced, the spiritual culture. It's not like India, I guess. And he told me a story. Told me this story to explain a little bit of why this phenomenon may occur in some areas. He shared with me that many hundreds of years ago in India, there were Buddhist communities, and these communities were taken over by Muslim groups. Muslim groups came and started to destroy the prayer sites, started to destroy a lot of their books, their teachings, and they even begged them. They said, please, these teachings are so old. We just want to preserve just these, just let us have these. And they said, no. Is there any word of our teachings in these? He said, no. He said, well, you don't need them. This is not something that is unique to that situation of Muslims attacking Buddhist temples. This is something that has occurred in all parts of the world. In America, with the Native Americans and the people who had come to those areas. This is a repeated thing in history. So I don't want to point at the Muslims in this situation as, pointing them out. It's just part of the story that was shared with me. And he told me that the Buddhists decided to retreat into the mountains. The Buddhists stayed there for hundreds of years, many years, to continue on with their practices, to continue what their ancestors have taught them. He explained to me that it hasn't been until recently where many of these hidden communities have started to come down from the mountains and have told them, the local, more modern communities, that what is going on needs to stop. The breaking down of our environment. That we must learn a sustainable way of living. Now, he told me this story to explain why it is that way, what we see in South America of the indigenous tribes living in seclusion. It's because perhaps at points in history when they were overtaken, this was the process that they went through of retreating and going into the mountains. But fortunately, this is a time where these teachings are starting to return to all communities of the world. And me personally, I'm looking forward to having a little bit of knowledge from the ancestral wisdom keepers of our world. So, where to next for the travels? Well, India. The Gant invited us to a conference that will be held in Assam, India. It takes place at the end of January, beginning of February, to the beginning of February. You're welcome to join. We'll be there. Many of the tribal leaders will be attending as well. And in the link below, I'm going to leave a link for Intimuju.org. That is the organizer who put the Peru event together and brought all the tribal members to the one location. Now, if you go to the website, you will see some of the video content that I have. Now, I just helped with the website. It's not my organization, and it's not my website. It's just somebody I have helped along the way, Antorco. I'll also put a link to the other video that was created. It is a message from the indigenous tribes, and that video will be linked below. It's a kind of a continuation of this video. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. The next video that I'm going to be posting is going to be of India. I'll be going to Rishikesh, the capital of yoga. We'll be going to New Delhi and Assam for the conference. So I hope you continue to watch and learn something about through the travels. Thank you. We will see you again.